Welcome back to Defender Resolves First, an unmatched podcast. I'm your co-host, Tommy Elliott, also known as John, although for today, I'll just be Tommy. With me, as always, is my shining superstar of a co-host, Sidious256, better known as Big Mike. Big Mike, what's up?
Hey, how's it going? I normally go by Michael, but I'll go by Big Mike today, as is tradition.
It's a day of change, don't you think?
I think it is a great change. Do you know why it's a great change, John?
I'd love to hear it, Big Mike. What's going on?
Well, we have a wonderful guest that we invited to the show, by the way. He will be here this fine day. With him joins the rest of the tournament organizers. We have our great friend Joshua. Joshua, how are we doing today?
Yeah, doing well.
And also joining us, we've got Gary. What's going on, Gary?
Not much. How are you guys doing today?
We're living that dream. And we've got Jack Gwynn, better known, well, I guess it's Noah, better known as Jack Gwynn. What's going on, Noah?
Doing better than I deserve. How are you?
Oh, man. That's pretty blessed. I love that. And then, actually, here by special invitation for the first time, a Defender Resolves First exclusive, we've got John, Zero Skater 12. What's going on, John?
What's up, Tommy? I am glad to actually be invited onto the show for once.
Well, I guess it had to happen sometime against my better judgment, because you're here and you've stolen my name.
Yeah, there can only be one John, and I think I've proven my worth. We've played off in tourney, and I think I've earned the right for the name.
See, and that's the reason you don't get invited to this show, John, is because it's my friggin' show. You show up and I have to give my name up. Only with you could such a travesty occur.
That's right.
So speaking of John being invited here the first time on the show, we usually have a question for everybody, and since you are invited this time, what is your unmatched origin story? How did you get into the game?
All right, great question, Mike. So I am going to give some credit where credit is due. My girlfriend always yells at me because her brother Joe got her the Battle of Legends Volume 1 set for Christmas. I believe it was Christmas of 2019, and it sat on our shelf for a few months, I believe until maybe around March or April, because we thought it was a 2v2 game and not a 1v1. And so we were just waiting for a good group of friends to get together and play it as 2v2. So we didn't have enough people. So it sat on our shelf for months. We finally cracked it open and we played a game. And obviously, as everybody, we fell in love instantly. And I went online. I looked it up. We thought the name of the game was Battle of Legends. We didn't know it was called Unmatched. So I looked up Battle of Legends board game, and there it is. And I found out that there was obviously more sets. There at the time, I think it was Robin Hood, Bigfoot, Bruce Lee, and then Jurassic Park had just came out, I think, at that time. And so obviously I ordered all of them instantly, and the rest is history. I mean, it was just hilarious because we sat there for months waiting to play because we thought it was actually just specifically meant to be a 2v2 game.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite an amazing origin story. And another origin story for joining us for the first time will be our great friend Gary. We all know him as Gary M from the Discord.
Hey, Mike. So, yeah, I think the first time I actually saw the game was at a Barnes & Noble, and it was one of those things where I looked at it and I'm like, oh, that looks different. This is a very clean box art. And then I looked at the price, I'm like, but not today. So I sat on it for a couple of months. I ended up buying it, I think like middle of 2019, like maybe June-ish, something like that. I got my group into it. We were playing a couple of matches, and then what hooked me was when I found out about the character contest. And fun times there. I found out about the character contest 3 days before it ended. So I did my submissions on that, and then from there it became, okay, so my friends will play this with me, but I'm going to go sit down and make like 150 characters for it and torture my friends with them.
And that you did, from my understanding. We all know Gary does really great in the fan deck contest stuffs and the play tests, I guess. Anyway, moving on. We have new to the tournament organizers and new to the show, our great friend Noah here, Jack Gwynn. How did you get into Unmatched?
Hey there. So I think it starts. I was in my junior year of college, about spring of 2020. What a great time! I was like, I thought I like Monopoly. I like Risk. I want to start growing my board game collection. And so Emma, my girlfriend at the time, she heard that and she stored it away. So when it came to my birthday in the summer, she came down to either getting me Unmatched or Ticket to Ride. And boy, oh boy, my life was changed basically on a coin flip there. Because if she gotten me Ticket to Ride instead, I don't know if I ever would have found the game, but she got it for me. I played my first match. I still remember. I was Alice, and my sister was Medusa. I think I won on Marmorial, and I was like, "Whoa! I gotta play as each character against each character." I found out there was Robin Hood and Bigfoot, and I was like, "I'll try it." And then after that, I bought the whole rest of it. I think I got in right when Goblin Fog came out, and I didn't realize, but I really might have got it within like the first 2 weeks of it being released. But overall, these have been my first online tournaments, my first online community, and I'm just really happy to be here.
There's an alternate community out there where Jack Gwynn is just absolutely tearing up the competitive scene of Ticket to Ride.
I've still never played it to this day. I don't even know what type of game it is.
I'm going to go on record on this podcast that many people will listen to and say it's not worth your time. And I'm expecting hate mail for that because it's actually a pretty popular game. But every time people breaking out at parties, I'm like, I'm going to leave. But it's good seeing you. So, all right. Well, we're glad to have you in our competitive scene as opposed to the one about trains. So, Josh, we didn't get to hear your Unmatched origin story today because we've heard it before in the very first episode, Chatting with Champions. But I'd love to ask you, and then everybody else, but what's your favorite character to play?
Well, I have to give credit where credit is due. I wouldn't be here if not for Sherlock, because he was the first character I saw played on a stream. And while Unmatched is a really great game because it's so simple you can pick up the rules by watching, it was just the fact that it was Sherlock that caught my attention, and like you're embodying the character, and really the rest is history. It just got me from there.
Love it. All right. John, who's your fave? I feel like there are a couple of different ones you could pick.
Yeah, as everybody I'm sure would guess. I mean, Jekyll was my favorite. He was the original favorite when I first started playing the game. But as of late, obviously it's been Yanenga throughout the Winter of Champions tournament and whatnot. But I think I gotta say my all-time favorite is probably Invisible Man. I think I've had my most enjoyable games of Unmatched with him, and I just love the complexity, and I love how much of an underdog he is. But that's kind of my thing in games is pick up a underdog character that I think actually has potential, learn it, master it, and prove everybody wrong. So I gotta say Invisible Man.
It would be impossible to see it any other way. So how about you, Gary? What do you got for a great favorite character?
All characters or characters that are out?
We'll go with characters that are out, even though we would love the Defenders Resolved exclusive.
Oh yeah. The exclusive is my favorite character is Redacted.
Oh, there you go.
My favorite character that's out though, unfortunately, it's probably Spike.
Ooh.
Oh, no.
Say it with praise. Say it loud and proud. Let them in the back hear you.
Yeah. My life is losing with Spike.
Oh, man. All right. Well, at least you said it with your whole chest. Noah, who's your favorite character to play as?
I gotta say, I think probably still Dracula. I haven't been playing him as much, but I really like him. Funny story, when I got Goblin Fog, he was the one I was the least interested in. But then Sherlock ended up being Sherlock, and the others were like, yeah, they're good. And then I started to think about Dracula, and I realized he's just such a jack of all trades with his after combat movement, his multi-side kicks, his healing, his big attacks, his great defenses. Like, he just has a little bit of everything, and I was attracted to that. So I like to believe that I was a Drac main before people realized he was quite as good as he was, but I don't think he's as good as he was anymore. either. So yeah.
Yeah, Battle of Legends Volume 2 really put the hurt on him. Drak's my boy, so love having a fellow Drak guy on the podcast. Mike doesn't like when I play Dracula anymore, but
I refuse to play him.
I don't know. That's ridiculous. So now we've got origin stories out of the way. We've got favorite characters out of the way. We're really excited to have you guys here. We wrapped up Winter of Champions. You guys are the glue that held that together. You put it all together. You wrote the rules, and you supported us throughout. I know I had some issues I had to come to you guys with during the tournament, and I cannot have been the only one. And you guys have been super supportive throughout the whole thing. One thing I'd love for our listeners to get to hear is, how did you guys start? What is the origin of the tournament organizers as a group? How did you guys come together to make that first one, Summer of Legends?
So I think I can speak a little bit on that. Basically, this was back near the end of 2020, I want to say. And
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, in the discussion channel, we were having like our 15th discussion, of tournament formats and what it would look like. And everybody's tossing around ideas like, oh, what if we do this? What if we do that? And everyone's just brainstorming. And I was, commenting on there. And we mentioned something about, oh, well, how would you run the tournament? How would you host it? And we were talking about Vorpal board and how only one person would have to have the subscription. And then you could host the tournament matches on Vorpal. And I think Gary had posted on there and saying something to the effect of, I would pitch in and help pay for a Vorpal board subscription to run a tournament. And I commented, I was like, yeah, I would totally do that as well. And then Gary sent me a private message and was like, so you want to do this? And I was like, heck yeah, I want to do this. Let's do it. Like, we had no idea what we were doing. But we just knew that it was enough talk, right? We just wanted to take action and actually make something happen because, like I said, this was like the 15th discussion or whatever. It was a routine thing of everybody pitching tournament formats and then nothing actually happening. So we just decided, we're just going to jump in. We're going to do it. We don't know what we're doing, but we're going to do something.
And that ended the tournament format discussion. We don't have them anymore.
Oh yeah, we all know that's true. So anyways, we're talking about it and we're like, all right, well, what are we gonna do? And we were talking about Vorpal, right? And who did we know that was the master of Vorpal and basically the only person known to use Vorpal in the Unmatched community at the time? It was Joshua, of course. So we bring Joshua into this group message and we're like, hey, we're going to start a tournament. So we want to run it on Vorpal board. And can you help us out here? Like, we need somebody who knows Vorpal. And that's basically how the three of us got together and did this thing. And then obviously it was at least a month of planning. We had to, come up with the tournament format, which is Conquest as we know it. And I remember I was just brainstorming, trying to figure out what's a fair format because we didn't want to do best of ones. We wanted some type of best of three format. And of course, in Unmatched, you don't want to do mirror matches. So that was a big issue. And I used to watch a lot of Hearthstone competitive, and they have a format called Conquest. And so I basically just took that idea and modified it a bit to fit the restrictions of Unmatched with, no mirrors and all of that. And I think it turned out pretty well. So we had to develop the format. We had to type up the rules. We had to get all the scrubbed characters ready for TTS. We had to make sure everything was good to go for Vorpal. And I wanted to stream the finals. And at the time, I didn't know anything about streaming. And so I call up my friend Alan, as we all know, as 645 Development now. And I was like, okay, so I want to stream the finals. Can you teach me how to stream? And he's like, yeah, sure. I'll kind of give you like a couple of lessons on how to stream. And so we did that. We took a few hours, sat down, and he showed me the basics. But by the end of it, he was just like, you know what? I have a proposition for you. What if I streamed it and you came down to my house for the weekend and I really made this thing like something special? And I was like, dude, I am so down for that, because he used to stream professional Super Smash Bros. Tournaments, and he would get flown out by the tournament organizers for those events,
Oh wow.
hotel and flight paid for to like different states in the US and for these big tournaments and stream them. So I knew he had the experience, and I was super hyped for that. Um, so yeah, that was just like a dream come true. And then, we just did it, right? We ran that first premier tournament. The stream turned out incredibly, and Restoration was so blown away by the stream that they wanted to make it official. And I guess now here we are. But yeah, that's basically the origin story of how we came together as TOs. We were just like, one day, hey, let's do a tournament, and that's it.
Buried in that story, which is super cool. I love that Alan was so involved because I love that guy.
Oh yeah.
Buried in there is, it's not just the origin of you guys coming together. It's not just the origin of the tournament, but I'm sure you guys realize that by creating this format, you have also created the meta, right? So much of what the meta is revolves around this conquest format. Do you guys ever like kind of think and like are kind of in awe that you put together this like scene and now it informs so much of what competitive play looks like? And you know, like when we talk about what characters' strengths are, we're talking about them in the context of conquest.
I think it's good to recognize how much an impact our actions have. I don't mean that in a scheming way where we're trying to manipulate anything. It's more we are just making decisions, and it's going to impact things no matter what we think. And for the meta, before tournaments, all we cared about was the spreadsheet done by Matt, and all we cared about was average win rate. But in a tournament, nobody's going to play Bigfoot against every fighter. You're not going to play him against Spike or Willow, really. And it doesn't matter how good you are at beating those weaker fighters. So you have sort of the tournament meta, which already skews, it cuts off your best matchups in a way, and it tends to revolve around your worst. So this is already before taking into account strategies and counter picks, and assuming both sides are equally skilled and equally want to win, then you're tending towards what should be a balancing factor. But at the same time, it's balanced because two people are in opposite directions trying to get that matchups that are best for their fighters. So you have, in competitive format, favoritism towards fighters that have lots of good matches and are consistent in winning. So niche fighters tend to be, well, niche. You need certain very specific conditions to make them work. And I think that's something that happens whether we really think about it or not. And I do think whatever formats you're throwing together, you're going to come up with some kind of meta that resembles that. It may not be identical, but there will be certain fighters favored and certain fighters disfavored. I think the way to sort of handle that is just recognize the limitations of what certain formats have, and if you want variety, just create a format that does what you
So
want.
basically, like Sherlock will be strong no matter how you slice it, but certain matchups like your Medusa versus Unanga might not happen just because different fighters are tending to get paired against each other, even though their relative strengths are pretty much the same.
Speaking on the
Yes.
niche thing you mentioned, Joshua, too, that's one thing I really like about Conquest format. And like Invisible Man, for example, that's obviously my best one. He's one of my mains. You guys all saw me win Summer of Legends with Invisible Man. I think in any other different format where maybe it involves hidden picks rather than a back and forth, counter pick style like Conquest offers, I don't think you would see counter picks like Invisible Man pop up, because if you take Invisible Man into any random fighter on the roster, chances are you'll hit a bad matchup, and not just a bad matchup, but maybe a matchup that's nearly unwinnable. And that's just no fun, and you're not going to take that risk. But in Conquest, it does allow you to pick a fighter like him in very niche scenarios where you have seen what your opponent has picked already, and you know that you can feel comfortable going in with Invisible Man into those matchups. So I do think it is really cool, the meta that has evolved around Conquest. And as much as I would love to explore new formats and get a different format to use maybe for like the summer and winter majors that we want to do, I think Conquest is probably here to stay because it is stable and I think just reliable enough to handle any new fighters that come into the roster, into the game, with maybe a few minor tweaks here and there. So I think it's reliable, and I think for the most part, people enjoy it. So it is kind of a shock how much of a positive response I think we've gotten overall.
Yeah. I think it is interesting when you're looking at stuff like that too. I'm not a huge fan of the extensive meta that develops through pick ban because I feel like sometimes we're playing a game before we can play a game. And I think that can detract from the core of what we're originally getting together to do in the first place. But I do like that there are some interesting implications that we got to see some of in Winter of Champions, where you had those pick ban selection orders where the follower could effectively control the flow of the game to make sure that they got one specific matchup that they knew they were going to have better odds in. So there's some fun stuff that happens when you're able to mitigate those odds selectively. But like John was saying, it is interesting to think that as we're talking about other formats and stuff, generally those formats still revolve around some form of conquest pick ban. Even when we're talking about the potential of like the in-person roster format, all that's doing is creating an artificial ladder pool, and then you're still doing conquest out of it. But by the nature of how it works, I think John's right that even if you would pick some specialists, the pool tends towards generalists because they're more reliable.
And in a way, there's like knobs and dials we can change to alter certain things of it because there is a tension between like, do you like our players getting to play the fighters they like, or is it too easy to counter? And if we change one, maybe that changes the other. So it's really about keeping the tension in a balanced place where we can make the most people happy.
Yep, I'll echo that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the idea that Conquest is probably here to stay. And then, I mean, even to Gary's point about other people springboarding from it, like when Mike and I wanted to do something different, we did the Weekend Blitz. Like, we still used Conquest. You know, we just kind of, what did we change? We just, favored with a point system lower tier characters, but we still used Conquest to make it happen. We just, quote, Noah there, used the knobs and the dials. Like, we turned them a little bit in a different way. But Conquest is, I think, even when we change things up, will be sort of the base to start with.
Life is good, but it could be better.
There you go. So, what about the Summer of Legends tournament made you guys want to add a fourth tournament organizer moving forward?
So I'd say overall, it wasn't just Summer of Legends, because I think we came out of that feeling all right. But I think we came out of it feeling all right because it was still really fresh, and it popped off a lot bigger than we thought it would, especially with that final stream and the reaction we got to it, the viewership we got to it. We kind of felt like it was a grand slam. But going into...
It was, by the way. You shouldn't feel it. You shouldn't feel like it was. It was. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Going into like the wind down from that, though, where we start looking at feedback and we start looking at stuff like we had asked for feedback on how was communication with the TOs. Were there situations where you felt like you couldn't ask a question? Were there questions that you have that you didn't get answered? And then going into Release Rumble, which was a completely different animal on a much tighter time scale, and feeling the pressure kind of build on that one. After Release Rumble, we were in a position where we're like, if this gets bigger, we need more hands. It's fun when it's just the triumvirate, the three of us making decisions behind the scenes, but there was a point in time where it's like we need additional perspective. We need somebody else that we can trust to uphold a certain level of quality and a certain standard of professionalism in the community. And we need another body on the ground doing things. We need, like, Joshua covers a lot of our Vorpal stuff. I cover a lot of our TTS stuff. John handles a lot of the planning and coordination with Alan. And then we still need somebody to help pick up all the stuff in between when we're making mailer lists and tracking stats and managing drops and forfeits and buys. There is a lot of behind the scenes work, and a lot of it is not fun to do.
Yeah, there is a lot that goes into it that people don't think about and that I would never have thought about. When I essentially signed up to be a tournament organizer. So definitely, like Gary said, with the Release Rumble especially, that was essentially a live event done online. But the times, everybody had to be playing their matches from X time to Y time, and it was very strict. And if we wanted to keep on schedule, we really had to make sure everything was moving at a fast pace. And between myself, who was streaming feature matches for some of the players, and Joshua, who was playing in the event, and Gary, I think, happened to be busy that weekend. So it was incredibly difficult to manage all that when we were essentially down to almost just one TO between me and Joshua doing half duty. And it was really rough. And so we were like, well, what are we going to do if another situation like that occurs, or one of us is just really busy with real life stuff during this event or during this weekend, and we just are unavailable. And we really just felt like having an extra person to help out, even if it was, like Gary said, just more menial tasks, but menial tasks that need to get done, like sending out the round pairings email to let everybody know that the pairings are up for the round. Go ahead and contact your opponents, because if you wait on sending that out, then players are waiting to start coordinating, and they may end up with more issues regarding scheduling if they're not able to, get in contact with their opponents ASAP. So even little things like that, we felt like it would definitely be a big help to have somebody else on the team. And Noah had reached out to me previously through messages and said, hey, I love what you guys are doing, and if there's anything I can ever do to help, let me know. And so he kind of put himself out there, and so he was almost the first person that came to mind for all of us when we were considering who to add on to the team.
Awesome. Well, Noah, how has it been joining the gang?
It's been great. They've been super welcoming, and I don't know that I really had too many expectations going in, but it's been a good time so far, and I'm excited to see how the tournaments develop and how I can help.
So what do you think has been the most surprising thing for you about becoming a TO?
Well, I think because I saw how well they went from the outside, like you see the streams, you see the emails that sound super official, and you just you see people playing games and there being results. I was like, wow, this is a well-oiled machine, and it is, but it's not as grandiose as I had imagined it, I guess. Like, in the end,
Sure.
this is like three cool dudes who are like, okay, we have these things that we need to get done. Can someone do them? And then someone signs up and is like, yeah, sure, I can write that email. Like it's not quite as organized as I would have expected, but not in a bad way. Because when you have so few people, like someone just steps up and it works.
Cool. What's your favorite part about being a TO now that your first tournament is under your belt?
I think I'll phrase my favorite part in terms of a highlight so far was when
Okay.
I I would just be kind of going about my day, and I'd see a DM pop up, and it'd be someone kind of reaching out and saying like, "Hey, I need assistance with this situation." And of course, like if we could make everything run perfectly smoothly, we would do that. But seeing as situations do pop up, I guess it was just really special to me that I was someone people thought of as like, I can go to them and get help with this, you know? So I like being able to help people navigate situations and just help the tournament run more smoothly, give everyone the best experience they can have.
Awesome. Joshua, we haven't heard a whole lot from you so far, so I'm going to lob this question at you, and then everybody can kind of give their own take. But I want to know how you guys feel about Winter of Champions compared to Summer of Legends as organizers, right? You doubled the entry level, so you had twice as many folks at least that could sign up. You had an extra week of Swiss. How do you feel overall that it went compared?
It's a very good success. I think I'm happy about a lot of things. We got a lot of new people and a lot of people engaged. I think they're here to stay, and that's really great. There are some growing pains just when it comes to scale. I'm really glad we preemptively got Noah because looking back, Summer of Legends, we were nearly at our limit, but we didn't really discover it. It's like you don't realize how much the difference is between almost at your limit and past your limit. And we it sounds like we didn't change that much because format wise we didn't, but in terms of scale we had 40 new people, like 40 more people compared to Summer of Legends and one extra round, but that nearly doubled the number of games being scheduled, which meant there's just so much more room for miscommunications or timing issues, and we didn't double the team. We only added one person.
Right.
So I think that paid off, and the foresight meant we were not overrun. I got sick in the middle of the tournament, and I think Gary also got sick near the end, and things like that. I am really glad we had someone in before who's just picking things up and able to make sure that we can actually function.
Awesome. And you guys all feel like this was a success, right? I mean, you guys are satisfied with how this went? As a player, I was, but I have a different perspective than you guys do. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always looking for ways to improve, but overall, definitely a successful venture.
Yeah, we definitely had some discussions coming out of it on like some theories and some policy changes that we might be able to make moving forward that might alleviate certain aspects of it that we saw coming up in the tournament. So I think we're going to try implementing some of those for next time. But by and large, I think we're in consensus that it ran relatively smoothly. And as far as like the scale of what we were able to accommodate with it, I think it was a success.
Yeah, I will echo that. I do think it was a big success overall. Obviously, there were some issues with drops and whatnot, but that's bound to happen in a Swiss format, especially as you get to the later rounds. It just is what it is. But I think one thing we do want to make sure for the future is that we not necessarily encourage drops, but at least publicize that option and make players aware that, hey, if life has just gotten too busy and you're having too much trouble scheduling, we'd rather have you feel okay about just dropping rather than missing your matches, because then if you're paired up with somebody and you miss your match, then it's not only affecting you but your opponent, right? Whereas if you drop preemptively, then at least your opponent can be paired up with somebody else, and so that their tournament run isn't as affected. So I think that's a big thing. And I don't know if people were maybe just afraid of dropping or they didn't know that it was an option, or so be it. But I think definitely publicizing that would be a good thing. And not even just if scheduling gets too hard, but if people join and they have different expectations going into it, and then they just find out it's not for them, like we don't want to force people through something that they don't necessarily want to do, and we don't want it to affect their opponents. So I think publicizing that is definitely a good thing. I also do want to mention that not only did we nearly double in size for the tournament between Summer of Legends and Winter of Champions, but we also started using Frank's awesome website, UM League, to essentially host the rankings and all of that and the match results and everything. So that was a big change from last time, and overall I'm incredibly pleased with how UML has worked out for us, and I'm really excited to see what capabilities that will offer in the future, because I know Frank is working on letting it do Swiss pairings, but that's a lot of coding troubles, so I hear. So who knows how soon that's going to be a thing, but I know for knockout tournaments, it is currently functional. So I'm really excited to see where the future of League takes the tournament scene, but I was just really thankful to have such an awesome website.
Yeah, I mean, like, he was throwing that to, like, he was putting I guess at least the finishing touches on that in just it felt like the last few days before we started the tournament, and we were like, can we really can this handle our weight, or do we kind of like half use it? And then we had those problems with the other thing we were using for Swiss pairings, and we were like, guess we're going all in on UM League, and it worked like a dream. I mean, shout out to Frank. He's amazing.
Yeah, Frank's development work on that has been beastly, to say the least. The turnaround time that he accomplished on that was pretty impressive, especially for the scope of what it does. I think it helped that from a developer standpoint, he made some very intelligent choices about how he was going to approach the project for his platform. I think he was very practical as far as what work he knew he could get done in it in what time frame. So I think honestly he knocked it out of the park on that. I'm really happy that we have that as an asset. It's really interesting. I'm sure you guys will get with him at some point on here to discuss it. But he approached us, I think, before Summer Legends was even finished.
No, he approached us
Premiere?
at the start of the premiere.
Start
like
of
around
Premiere.
there.
Okay. Yeah, but like at that point, we hadn't even settled on all of our decisions for our formats at that point. So for him, we were like, I mean, yeah, if you build it, they will come, sure. And
Right.
it just kind of went from there of like, we can't really coach you on what you should do, because I know a big concern of his was that he didn't want to fragment the community, because before UM League, the only thing that was out there as far as play tracking was the Google spreadsheet, and then UMDB links into that. So that was all MS7C, Matt. That was all his work. I know Frank was really concerned about the premise of introducing a league site that would fragment the community, but there isn't an alternative.
Yeah.
And the quality and efficiency that thing runs at, there isn't going to be an alternative. It's just tremendous.
Yeah, I'm impressed by the fact that it's been around for such a short amount of time. If you think about how long we've been playing this game, like UM League has not been around for that much of it, and yet it already feels like something that's a staple part of the community. Like it's been live for like 2 months, and it already it feels like it's been around for forever. That's how integral I think it is.
Yeah, definitely.
So definitely kudos to Frank. We did have him on to talk about the history of that, which was super fascinating. So Frank, I hope you're listening, because everybody just tooted your horn. And then also shout out to Chad, who does all that super cool bot work for the Discord on that, which definitely makes it all come to life for me, I think. Those little bot commands.
And
So,
of course, Hat Chowder, the what happened to me would not be a thing without those bots.
I still gotta get
the
a
bot
t-shirt.
notifications on the match.
Is that who we have to blame? Is that who we
yeah,
have to blame?
I don't know if we.
So we'll
what happened?
blame Chad for the origin of what happened.
He's gonna be selling merch at Gen Con, guys.
Hey, I bought a
Oh.
shirt myself. You guys
Wow.
should just ask him. It's a great one. I can't wait to wear it.
I gotta pick some up.
What a time to be alive. Were there aspects of the Winter of Champions tournament that you felt like maybe weren't working the way you wanted to, that you made note of? I mean, you guys have alluded to, and you are like already did on the podcast just now too. You've alluded to the idea that maybe there were a lot more people who skipped their matches this time around than there were last time, which perhaps is to be expected with 40 more new characters. There's more opportunity for that kind of thing to pop up. But just like, yeah, wondering if there was anything that happened here that like you just kind of made a note like, okay, next time we're going to have to do something about this specific issue.
I don't know that it's necessarily like it was more of an issue this time. I think it was an issue last time, it was an issue this time, and the fact that the scale and scope of players increased sort of exacerbated it to a point that we needed to address it. Especially looking at the player breakdown on Summer of Legends, where I forget what the exact statistic was, but I think it was something like 90 to 95% of our player base was in Eastern or Central time. That's a big difference when we're talking about Winter of Champions, where we had people in contention in the top 30, and I would say a quarter of them were in non-US time zones.
Defender resolves first. We do the math.
We have a really strong European contingent this time.
Yes.
So you think that was like that had an effect on that?
I think so. I mean, we did have the extra round of Swiss this time around. I know people, especially people who felt like they weren't in contention for a top 16 promo or top 8 advancement, were looking at round 7 like, I've done my work and put in 6. Do I need to do a 7th? And then there were people that are like, especially like some of the newer players who are just like, heck yeah, I'm going to do more tournament games. So, I mean, we had both sides of that coin. But I think just as you have more people, you're going to have more schedule conflicts. You're going to have more forfeited games.
Yeah, so I think really there were some growing pains like Joshua has mentioned. I mean, it's just going to be harder to keep everything on track when you have more people. And that's part of our consideration moving forward, I think, is we keep, allowing the scene to grow, the tournament cap, the player cap, because we were at 128 and we didn't quite reach that for Winter of Champions, but we were close. I know after signups we broke 100. So do we continue on with 128 cap, or do we try to let even more people in? And I don't know that would be a smart thing to do. It seemed like Winter of Champions was already pushing the envelope here with how many players we could accommodate. But part of the goal, again, is to let as many people join who are interested so that we can get new players into it and grow the scene. So you gotta, it's a fine line between letting people in because you want to grow the scene and how many players can you reasonably accommodate and have an event that runs smoothly.
Right.
So.
And we're doing this for the community, so we want to make it kind of as open as we can while keeping the events at what we want them to be. But I don't know if anyone else looks at the welcome channel on the Discord, but it has been blowing up with all the Marvel, like all the people who, I mean, I assume they're coming in because of Marvel. So I imagine based on that, we'll have even more interest than we did for Winter of Champions. So a lot to think about going forwards and if we want to change the format or how we're going to handle that growth.
Cool.
I have seen it blown up. It's actually something to notice, and I think we all expected this in a sense. So you're definitely onto something there.
Yeah. One thing. So the idea, right, is where you're going to do this summer and like winter, and those are like the main events. Am I correct in that assumption before I ask this next question?
For now.
That is, for now, that is the plan.
Okay. So one thing that's been really interesting to note is how much the game has changed from Summer of Legends to Winter of Champions with only 4 characters and 1 map being introduced in between. right? Like, I feel like the entire meta completely changes, and the way that we do pick ban has completely shifted. The next time we do a tournament, we could be looking at like 10 new fighters and 3-4 new
I
maps.
think
It's either going to be 8 or 10, I think, is what
I
it
think
is.
8. I don't think Jurassic Park, or I don't think Houdini and Genie will quite make it for Summer of Legends.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're looking at 8 new characters and 3 new maps, which is, I mean, double what we just saw. So how do you guys think that will impact the tournament scene?
I definitely would. It's going to be a huge impact, right? There's no doubt about it.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like you said, we saw what happened with only 4 new characters, and with 8, that's twice as many new characters as we saw from the jump between the last 2 tournaments, and it's going to be insane. Not to mention just the characters, but the new item mechanic from the maps for the Marvel sets. That could be a big thing that changes things up. We're gonna have our first large fighter being the T-Rex, and that's a whole nother issue that we got to tackle. Right? Is size
Right.
for online play, both on
Yeah.
and on Vorpal, and how are we going to handle that? But yeah, that's another discussion. But it's going to definitely be a lot different, and that's why I'm hesitant on doing too many changes to the actual Conquest format, because it's going to feel completely new and fresh with a new meta because of all the new fighters. So even if we didn't change anything about the format, it's going to feel different, and it's going to provide that fresh, meta, so to speak, that people are looking for.
Yeah.
So that makes me definitely hesitant to change the format. But as I mentioned before, I also would like to have Summer of Legends and Winter of Champions, both events, be using a different format. So maybe one of them uses Conquest and the other uses some undiscovered format that we've yet to come up with. I think it would be nice to be able to just switch it up between the two.
That's a cool thought. That's interesting. I hadn't heard that before. Defender Resolve's first exclusive, a desire to form a new format for the different tournament scenes. On the subject of the future, as you guys may or may not know, Mike and I hosted a roundtable with some folks who were in the tournament this last season, and they had some thoughts on the idea of pre-pick bans moving forward. Now, there was not a consensus on this issue, so there's no easy answer I'm throwing at you. But since we're talking about the future and the plethora of new characters we're getting, right? Like, it's not like we'll have a limited roster. So, how do you guys feel about the thought of pre-pick bans? This is not like a trap. You don't have to tell me yes, we're going to do it, no, we're not going to do it. But I would like to hear your thoughts, and I think the community wants to know too. Like, is this something you guys are considering? Is it even on the table? What are your thoughts surrounding it?
So I definitely want everybody to be able to weigh in here, but I did just do a stream with Freak recently. It was yesterday, actually, and we just talked format for, I don't know, it was maybe an hour to 2 hours. So quite a long time just talking format stuff and taking questions and suggestions from the chat and just talking about it all. And I think my personal thought about pre-pick bans are that if the majority of players wanted it, I would probably be in favor. But personally, my issue with it is that I think likely you would see players who would go up against somebody and look up their stats on League and then just ban that player's main fighter just so they don't have to deal with it because they know that's their best fighter. So me, for example, I'm sure everybody would just ban my Yanenga. Somebody like Tom or Bug Hunter, they would just get their little red banned, right? Joshua would get Sherlock banned. Maybe a lot of people would.
Well, that happens all the time
And
anyway.
Noah would get his Dracula banned, and I think Gary would be the only one safe with his spike. But that would be my only concern, is that players would just get their mains banned out, and then that just kind of feels bad to never be able to play your favorite fighter.
If I can weigh in here, I don't mean.
Please do.
The way I see it happening, at least for me, doesn't matter to me too much if I'm playing against Palm with red or I'm playing against John with Yananga. If Sherlock's on the table, he probably won't be on the table any longer if I can ban him before.
Sure.
So, like, I guess for me, I'm not as afraid of people's specific like their favorites as I am of just like who I see as the strongest, you know? So if I can get rid of that, I might be able to develop strategies to more easily counterpick red
Yeah.
or someone like that than I could some fighters who just seem to be very, very tough to say the least. So for that reason, I think I would be interested in the pre-pick ban in the hopes that it would open up the meta a little bit, like allow for some more flexibility, possibly. But I haven't ran through scenarios, so I don't know if it would help with that. It's just an idea.
I have a completely dissenting third viewpoint.
Okay, Gary, let's hear it.
So I don't agree with the idea of a pre-pick ban in general. The reasoning behind that is we're already metagaming how we play the game by adding conquest on top of it. And now what we're proposing is we need to metagame conquest by adding a pre-ban phase onto conquest to fix a perceived problem in conquest rather than patching conquest. In addition to that, like going back to the fact that Battle of Legends Volume 2 alone changed the meta so significantly, there's an additional factor in the release of the characters we have now that people aren't really taking into consideration, which is that was one themed box of 4 fighters. We're going to be introducing a 3-pack, a 3-pack, and a 2-pack, all with different purposes, all with different themes and balance points inside those sets. So we're not looking at one set shaking up the meta with its mechanics. We're looking at a blender effect with 3 different set effects coming in, not even getting into the item mechanics for the maps in the Marvel sets. There are too many moving parts right now. I don't know that we're ever going to have a point in time again where there are not moving parts. I feel like what we had last year was a very unique situation where we had our entire release schedule swept clean by COVID. That's not going to happen again. We're staring down the barrel of 12 to 16 characters a year every year until Restoration says we don't want to do this anymore. So I feel like what we're in right now is a reaction to Sherlock when they have solutions in the pipeline and have said that they have solutions in the pipeline that are specifically designed to deal with these characters. And we've already seen it happen with Bigfoot. Bigfoot was heavily marginalized this tournament. And that happened because of how the Volume 2 characters interact with him and how Pickban interacts with those characters. We're seeing it happen already with how the new Marvel characters interact with Medusa. And there are characters that I have seen that interact with Sherlock in ways that make you not want to play Sherlock anymore.
You heard it here, folks.
It was a Defenders Resolve first
I
exclusive.
think to add to that, the Volume 2 change, I was always interested in how much things would change between Summer of Legends and Winter of Champions. But this jump from Winter of Champions to the next Summer of Legends will be quite different because we had Volume 2 for almost 6 months. People were testing these 4 fighters and getting very good at them. But when you throw in 8 new fighters with varying amounts of time and experience, you're changing up the meta not just by the newness of it, because even though Volume 2 was new, people had sort of agreed upon certain matchups, like the Yananga Medusa matchup, the Wukong Bigfoot, stuff like that. I think the latter also weaponized people a lot faster. And I think UML also, as John mentioned, you could just look up people's stats. You could before the spreadsheet, but it was just lots and lots of rows and columns of
time
different
consuming
fighters that you couldn't really. If you put in the effort, you could get some of it out. Now it's just way easier.
Yeah.
And it's an arms race because I think for the long-standing community members who've already played, you're not just adapting to new fighters. All the old fighters with new matchups, you throw out your experience out of the window because you don't know how these play. So it's a big question mark whether or not it deviates and becomes more variety and harder to game out, or because there's so much variety, people stick to the safe things and you end up with less variety. It's not clear. I think people always talk about variety in format, but unless you're doing some stuff randomly, there is no format that makes it impossible for everyone to agree that, or this is the best way to do it and just stick with it because everyone else is already doing it. There are only a certain set of viable things. Let's say people picking Yananga and Sinbad. It it's so obvious that it limits stuff, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Like there are other fighters good into Yananga, but because you have an easy path, everyone goes for it, and then it sort of snowballs.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, I
So
mean, that's basically what the meta is, right? And that's going to happen in any competitive game. People are going to play the best fighters, and so you're going to end up seeing the meta, showcased often. That's just, it is how it is.
yeah, I the thing is like there are other valid picking options that get you equal if not better winning odds, but it's just the sheer it's almost alive in a sense that no single person is deciding things, but because people talk over the course of several weeks, and because you have so many people playing matchups, and they learn from that match and go play another match, and that person learns, and so on, you you have this general sort of group think almost.
Yeah, it's kind of like and if this is a dumb analogy, you just stop me. But like if you have a river, right? It starts out as something really small, but then as you go, you'll get this little carved out path, and the water will follow that because that's the path of least resistance. As it goes, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, more firm, set in the direction and the path it was going because it's just been traveled. And I think that's a lot of what we see with the meta. One of the things I'm most
Definitely.
excited for with this explosion, I guess you could call it, that we're having going into the next tournament and going forward, I suppose, is um, it's interesting to talk about who will get taken down from their top seats, I guess, in terms of fighters. But I think it'll be more exciting in a subtle way to see who comes back up. Like Sinbad he was like going to yeah, he's pretty good, you know, and suddenly he's way relevant again. And it'll be interesting to see if we can have something like that for, say, Alice or even Spike, or Arthur. Everyone wants that, I think. That'll be really fun to see if we can get some characters, if they can get revisited.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, as well as what Gary said earlier, I think we're hesitant to make too many changes to Conquest because it is so stable and it's almost a self-writing format. So, with all the new fighters being released, we may see Sherlock drop in popularity if there are some counters for him, and we may see other older fighters rise up, like Noah mentioned, just because maybe they beat some of the new fighters who are now the new meta. And fighters like Bloody Mary, who are super relevant against one of the top fighters, we may see a lot of that happening. And so to preemptively make any drastic changes would probably be a mistake. I think we'd be more likely to change things when we see that there actually is a problem. But personally, I think the meta for Winter of Champions was very balanced. And although you might have seen a lot of the same matchups and same fighters being played often, they weren't blowout matches like Yananga versus Little Red or Yananga versus Medusa, Bigfoot versus Little Red. You saw a lot of them, but those are balanced matchups, and so it's fun for both players to be playing the actual game of Unmatched in that specific matchup. So I think that's a great thing. And if we see that there becomes a problem, like if there's too many counter picks for every fighter, then sure, we need to change something, right? Because that's no fun to just purely get counterpicked. But I think as long as we can make small tweaks to maybe the leader follower balance to keep that in check, I don't think any drastic changes need to be taken preemptively.
Well,
Yeah, I think to add to that, there are many balanced and fun matchups. I think when it comes to people going to a tournament with so many fighters, I guess the expectation and the reality, there's a mismatch sometimes. The expectation is that you get to pick almost anyone and you get to play almost anyone, but then you very quickly get caught up with the meta, and if you want to win, you you feel compelled. And this is not saying you have to pick, or even there are the winning options, but you feel compelled to pick a subset of fighters, and if you do that many times over, say, 7 rounds, and you only get to play 6 fighters out of your 12 to no, out of your 14 to 21 possible games, it starts feeling like you're missing out a lot. And I think this doesn't scale because the fighter numbers are increasing, the possible matchups are increasing, but the number of games you actually get to play doesn't change. So you are getting a proportionally smaller section of what unmatched could be. And I think, yes, competitive is going to tend towards winning and meta. It's just sort of that underlying expectation that wasn't necessarily voiced or even realized. But at the end of it, you feel I didn't get to play other fighters or face other fighters, and you couldn't really do anything about that. So I don't think it's necessarily something you could fix, but I think the way to go about it is maybe faster tournaments that are shorter so people can have time to just jump into the next one when the new fighter comes out and then the meta is different again, instead of having the same meta for 7 weeks or 6 weeks, which is quite long.
yeah, I hear that.
Or alternative tournaments, which I think that's something people overlook because tournaments can be created with specific goals in mind, and they're always going to favor certain things, whether you intend to or not. And you can't make a tournament do everything. You're just going to make nobody happy. And I think the healthy way to do it is recognize what people want and really just make something different that people want and can commit to.
Yeah, I mean, my
And I
read.
think, yeah,
No, I was just gonna say my read on.
yeah, that's it.
Okay, yeah, my read on what you guys do and what the tournaments that you guys have organized and designed so far has been is that the goal at play is twofold. There's a yin yang strategy here where it is meant to appeal to people who just play this game for fun, and it is meant to appeal to folks who want to play this game very competitively. And those two things, at least in the tournament that you guys run, are not at odds with one another. Right? Like the format that you guys design and that the way that you support it is meant to blend the idea of folks who are just coming in and wanting to play their favorite fighters and folks who are coming in and they want to play the competitive meta, and everybody can get along and have fun and have a good time along the way. That's my read on it. I mean, would you guys say that that's accurate?
I think so.
Yeah, I would say
I think
so.
one of the strengths of Swiss is that it supports both really well because you might start off with fairly unbalanced matchups between players, but it's almost like it's basically an algorithm, like it's a machine trying to give everyone the best experience in a way because it's pairing everyone up against the others who have had the most similar results, so that by the end, like every match almost feels like it should probably be close because like the people with 3 wins and 3 losses are going against the other people with 3 wins and 3 losses. It means that the people who want to play at a certain level can find other people at that level, whether that's the top of competitive with the min maxing, the most in tune with the meta, or whether that's the people who want to have fun but also want to like play Angel and see what they can do with that, you know? So I think that's a strong suit of Swiss, but the weakness that we're running into is the length because the more people you add in, the longer it has to be. And we kind of hit that wall of we cannot make it any longer. And we probably shouldn't keep it as long as it was this time. So we have a challenge of finding a way of kind of keeping that dynamic, but also making it shorter.
You talked a little bit earlier. John brought this up. I think Gary kind of touched on it too. The idea that so this time you had a little over 100 fighters or I'm sorry, 100 signups. So 100 people who are playing. And you don't know if next time you're going to do the same cap or you're going to drop down to 64. Is the thought that the community is about, from what I can see, they're kind of exploding with this desire to do their own community run tournaments. Calvin's got that Deadpool thing going on. Joshua, you're doing that team-based 1v1. Mike and I occasionally do the weekend blitz. Do you think that helps make your decision on whether you maybe you can only do 64 players next time because there's a lot of other events happening in the meantime that are supported? It's not just the tournament anymore, right, where people are playing. There's also ladder that's going on 24/7. I think ladder really helps mitigate that too. So I mean, what are your thoughts about the way that community tournaments are developing and how that impacts what you guys feel, if any, pressure, at least in terms of how you approach them and allow people in?
Yeah, so I think ladder does have a pretty big impact on how we're going to be approaching things. It definitely creates some interesting effects where, as new sets release, it's creating a boot camp for metagame, which is really interesting. It also has some implications in the fact that it has a micro meta because it's not the full pool of fighters. It's only ever a slice of 10 and a slice of 5 maps. And even just having that 5 map slice can corrupt or culture things pretty significantly. When you talk about it in the context of just general competitive play, though, I think you're always going to have players who absolutely want hardcore knockout or Swiss ranked play. Ladder is a passing fancy for them. At the same time, you're going to have players that prefer stuff like ladder, especially people coming out of Hearthstone, games like that, where it's yeah, I just want a pickup game with a little bit more weight to it. I'm not looking for something that's necessarily going to be harshly ranking me against other people. I just want a higher quality of opponent. And then you have, your normal casual and friendly games that you're going to pick up with your friends where you're doing whatever you want. So I do think that ladder fills a unique role in that environment. And I think there is a bit of bleed over from hardcore competitive to softcore competitive in ladder. So I would not be surprised if we saw a little bit of focal shift from the tournaments towards ladder as some of those players settle into something that's a little bit more comfortable for them,
We've heard
where they don't
say
have
that
to
already.
make that time commitment. At the same time, I can see people who get into ladder being fed upwards into that formal tournament structure where they're getting a little bit more serious about how they want to see that play out. I'm hoping that what we can do as we move forward is the size of the community is always going to be a stressor for our events because we always want to promote as much inclusivity in the event as possible. But the reality becomes, can we feasibly run something with X hundred people that want to play in it? Is there a scenario where we can make that happen across multiple events? Is the answer to that qualifiers? Is the answer to that something like regionals? It's stuff we've discussed before. But ultimately, we're in a position where it has to be the right time to pull a trigger for that kind of stuff. And ladder is a pressure release valve. Ladder is definitely that factor in the environment that allows us to go, hey guys, we really want to do this, but we can't practically do this, so we have to cap it at this many entrants. And then people don't have to feel well, great, cool. So for the next 2 months, I can't play competitively.
Right.
No, because those people can turn around and enjoy ladder like they were yesterday.
Yeah. Some of the pressure is definitely off, I think. in that sense. John, I know you asked if you could talk a little bit about community tournaments, so I just kind of want to lob it to you to hear, what your thoughts there are.
Yeah, so I just want to add that to your previous question, I think yes, having those community tournaments and ladder definitely takes some of the pressure off of us and almost lets us just keep going with what we know works, being conquest, right? We don't need to make any major changes because there's a lot of opportunity for community members to organize their own events with whatever kind of wacky formats, and that's going to kind of, scratch the itch, so to speak, of what players want with different variety of matchups like we saw in the weekend blitz and among other things. So I think the community tournaments definitely are going to make things easier on us, and people can just expect that the big, quotes, official tournaments that we run are going to be conquest, and it's what they've seen and done before. So providing that stability, I think, is great. And then on top of that, the format Joshua is trying to start up with, it's 1v1 games, but it's a team-based thing where you are winning or losing collectively as a team. I think that's really cool. And we saw the 2v2 tournament that Calvin ran. That is a whole new thing. 2v2 is a fantastic way to play this game, in my opinion. That's how I started off playing, was solely 2v2, and I just had an absolute blast. So I think that is underexplored, and that tournament was great in showcasing that. And then we even have things like the customs tournament that was ran, and I know there's another one starting up. So if people want different formats and they want to play these different matchups and these just wacky game styles, right? They have a place to do that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, the pressure doesn't have to be put on us to accommodate those types of players in addition to all the competitive players and just everybody that we're trying to accommodate with our official events. Like you said, we're trying to get as many people as possible, make it as inclusive as possible so that the players who just want to jump in and have fun with Swiss, it matches them up great, like Noah said. And with the hyper competitive players, they still get what they're looking for. And it's kind of the best of both worlds. Again, the only issue just being how do we kind of make it shorter? And if we do have to cut down on the player entrant cap, maybe down to 64 in order to make it shorter like we want, to prevent burnout, I think the community tournaments definitely play an important role in providing the other formats that people want to do. Or if they couldn't sign up in time for the major events, at least there's other things going on in the community alongside ladder that they can participate in.
Yeah, I think community tournaments not only provide that pressure involved, but they also provide data. You know, I'm a certified data farmer, but people have ideas, and we are not, like, I'm supportive of these ideas. The thing is, these big tournaments are like, they have a lot of momentum, but they also have a lot of inertia. They resist change in any direction. And we cannot, we do not feasibly have the effort and time to reinvent a tournament every 6 months. So just seeing what works, what doesn't, or the results in a smaller slice that can iterate faster, like the weekend blitz ran over a weekend, and other tournaments can run within 3 weeks, 6 weeks. Like, but with a lot less people and a lot less effort, it it lets people experiment, and I think that's something we don't really have the luxury of doing. Even just format talk, we can talk within ourselves and try it out, but it's not really the same extent. We don't have the capacity to try out 5 different formats and run 5 different big tournaments and say this is the best one. The choice we have is, we have something that works. We could change it to something that might totally not work for 64 people over 6 months, 6 weeks, and that would, like, it's not a disaster, but it it's a wasted opportunity. So that's kind of the stuff we're dealing with. It's not just changing things here and there because there's a perceived problem. The bigger thing is we need to make sure it still runs at all.
Right. So
That makes sense.
kind of with the trial and error mindset, we have because we have so many players that we're managing, any trial is going to be a big trial, which leaves room for big error. But if you have these smaller, like community run, I mean, we're part of the community, but if you want to call them the community run tournaments, the smaller trial, smaller error. Like if there is a big flaw, it's not going to impact nearly as many people. So in a way, it's a safer place to experiment.
Yeah, and I think also with those, you have people join because they believe in the idea, which is also a good gauge. If lots of people join, maybe you have something that a lot of people believe in. So,
Right.
and if a lot of people, like if you create a community tournament that gets 100 people, I mean, I would notice it. You might have struck gold. So it's just stuff like this where for our tournaments, we have people joining for a variety of reasons. Like there are prizes. There's like there are the outside people jumping in from the streams might think of these as the only tournaments out there, and I think just having these smaller things, which are passion projects, as in, I mean, people just believe in it and just seeing how it works and what plays out. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Gary, you've got something going on for Gen Con.
Yes, we do. Last year at Gen Con, we ran what we called pod draft, which was kind of a necessity with the fighter pool and the time availability that we had allocated to us at Gen Con. We have a little bit more flexibility this year, so there's a little bit more interesting stuff going on. But online, we have the benefit of being able to sit two people down in TTS or Vorpal and give them all the digital assets they want and say, go nuts, do whatever you want. Sure, play best of 5. The problem that we run into in real life is we can't ask people to bring an entire playset of Unmatched to Gen Con and cart it around with them. So
Right.
we're in the unique position of having to basically provide a finite number of assets and then figure out what kind of novel, enjoyable gameplay we can get out of that. So what we had settled on was basically blind, like a sort of hidden draft. So we more or less make booster packs of 3 fighters. There was only one duplicate fighter in the pool, which was Alice, because we didn't have the right number of fighters to be able to do 8-player single limb knockout. But you get these packs of 3 fighters and you draft them. And at the end of it, you each have 3 fighters from different packs, and then you split up and you play single elimination best of 1, and you can't replay a fighter. So you have 3 fighters for your entire tournament run, and you have to decide, do I want to try to make it further on these better fighters, or do I need to save my best fighter for finals? So it starts out in top 8, and then it's top 4, and then it's finals, and then you're done. And what we were able to do is we were able to run 2 of these pods in parallel, and we were able to run 4 sessions across the whole weekend. So ultimately, we were able to get 64 seats of players through this tournament experience, and we got some really great feedback from it, and it just kind of became the de facto for what we run in person now. So I've run 2 more of them at Master Goblin Games in State College, and the most recent one we actually ran with Marvel characters patched in to replace some of the lower tier characters like from the Buffy set.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the higher tier characters that would be considered problematic. So like we swapped out Sherlock for somebody. And it's interesting, like player response to it is really, really good, despite the fact that it is wildly divergent from what we play online.
Sure.
This year at Gen Con, we're taking it a step further. We're going to be, of course, analyzing what we want to do with that draft, how we want to approach it. We're going to maintain the 8-player pods. We're still going to run 4 sessions over the weekend. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to cap it all off on Saturday with a special event where we invite back all of the winners from the other pods to do an invitationals tournament that'll be a little bit closer to what we do online. We have some really exciting plans for that, but what it'll at least give everybody is the same interaction from Gen Con last year, where you can come, get participation promos, play some lightweight games. If you want to enter in more than one pod, you can play through a couple of times, try different stuff, have fun with that draft. And then if you win, you're invited to come back on Saturday and play something a little bit more hardcore.
That's pretty cool. Something for everybody to look
Thrilled.
forward to.
Thrilled to be a part of it.
Heck yeah. I'm going to have to sign up for that.
Yeah, I think most of us are going to Gen Con, and we'd love to see everybody there. I can't wait to see what it may all have in stock for us, as well as, I believe, the Origins convention. Is that right, Gary?
Yep. Origins will be basically a repeat of Gen Con from last year, so we won't have the invitationals set up at Origins. Part of that factor is, playing to the crowd that you have, where Origins is just a touch smaller. It's our first time there running this stuff, so we're going to be dipping our toes in the water this year with it. But at worst, you're still going to be getting the experience you would have gotten at Gen Con last year. And of course, it's going to be with the benefit of any patches that we're going to be making to that draft format. So really the only thing that will be missing from Origins is that heftier invitational at the end. But I think it'll be a great time either way.
Very exciting stuff. Very exciting stuff to see in the future. In-person tournaments, y'all. Not just online anymore.
Yeah. Down the road, there's some wild options that we keep throwing around with the idea of roster format, but we're not quite there yet. I don't think we quite have the footprint to support that in in-person play. Maybe next year at Gen Con, though. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, to wrap up our Winner of Champions discussion, you guys had a forum you wanted to plug on the podcast?
Yeah, so for anyone who played in the tournament, thanks so much. Hey, I think it went really well, but as we've said before, we're always looking for ways to improve, and so as part of our kind of sign-off of congrats and everything, we sent out an email, and we had a link to a forum, and we posted it in the Discord as well, I think. Anyway, it just has a few questions to ask for what you think could have gone better, what you liked, what you didn't like, and we really pay attention to those because, again, we're doing these tournaments for the community, and so we want to get the community's response. So if you'd fill that out, that would be great, and it will help us to continue to make these events better and better.
Life is good,
Cool.
but it can be better, and you need to be a part
That's
of it.
That's it. Do you guys? So, I just really want to thank you guys for coming on and talking to us and being super vocal to the community. And thanks for putting together, the tournament, which had over 100 members of our community join and play. So obviously, there's a lot of love from the community for what we do. It's pretty successful. Congrats to John for getting invited to this podcast officially and for winning his second tournament, which I don't think is as cool as getting invited to Defender Results.
I don't think so.
Of course not. No,
Yeah.
not even.
No, but I'll toss it out. I'll toss it out there. Do you guys have anything that you'd like to add to our listeners before we let you go?
I just want to add to anybody listening who has not joined one of our tournaments, I would highly recommend doing so. If you just want to dive in and become part of the community, no better way than to join a tournament like this, because it's just a huge collection of people who love Unmatched. They love playing the game, and there's a lot of hype around it. People like to, share their match results, and everybody likes good underdog stories and just looking at interesting matchups that occurred, and there's just a lot of hype surrounding the whole event, and there's streams, people streaming their matches, some people streaming other people's matches. So there's a lot of content to watch and keep up with. And if you really just want to be a part of the whole thing, we definitely welcome you to try it out and do so, because we're always looking for new community members, new players, and a lot of our most successful players in these events end up being first timers. Like in Summer of Legends, we saw players like Palm and Calvin, who that was their first tournament, and they were relatively new to the game and they exceeded. And then this time we have players like, Darkblade and Caesar, who again are relatively new, but they made it to the semifinals.
Darkblade was in Summer of
Well,
Legends.
he was, but still, like, it's just players who maybe they're not as active as some of the regulars on Discord. That doesn't mean that they're not good players, right? And you never know how good you are until you just give it a shot and test your skills against everybody. So it's just a ton of fun, regardless of how you perform. If you want to be involved, I would highly recommend you do so.
Couldn't agree more.
Awesome.
Could
Yeah.
not agree more.
Yeah, and I couldn't either. And as our listeners heard on yesterday's episode, there's just like so many great stories that come out of joining a tournament like this. My favorite part about it is the community building, getting to meet and talk to people and just play a couple of games. I mean, as long as you both are, engaged in having fun, it's a great way to spend 2 to 3 hours. Like, we're playing games, man. It's great. And this community is super strong and super welcoming. So, good group
You
of
want to know
folks to
my
play
favorite
games
part?
with. What's your favorite part,
I
Mike?
truly mean this, and this is nothing against you, John, but it's how everybody schemes to beat John every week. And it's openly put in the Discord that they're scheming to beat John. And then they'll be like, need practice, game coming up. And then you look at their opponent, it's John. I love that. I love this.
John, I can't wait for John to listen to our roundtable episode with everybody, because I want to say like a solid 15 minutes of that discussion was folks talking about, so my strategy to beat John was, and like people talking about how much time and effort they put into strategizing the John takedown.
I love it.
It's a feat.
Pro tip. Strategy to beat John does not include leaving Sherlock.
Yeah, we'll see as more fighters come out. Eventually, you can't ban them all. That's all I'm gonna say.
All I'm gonna say is there's one. I only know of one true Sherlock counter. I tried Yananga, didn't work. The ban is the true Sherlock.
We said that. We said that on Defenders Resolve First. We said that in one of our episodes. We came out with it. You ban him.
Episode 2. Episode 2. What's the counter to Sherlock? Mike and I, Defender Resolve's first exclusive. You ban him. Confirmed here today by tournament organizer Noah. Jack Wynn with the confirmation. I'm that gif right now from Brooklyn Nine-Nine of the captain. Vindication! That is me right now. I am feeling terrific.
Yes.
Man, I mean, I think that's as great a point as any to wrap it up on a high note where I got to be right. So, Mike, what do we always say here on the pod?
Well, John, that it's that the Defenders resolve first.
You'll love to see it. Have a good night, everyone.